The forest of Arendale stretched for miles, untouched by human machines and blessed with ancient silence. Few dared to venture deep within its tangled roots and towering canopies, for stories whispered of creatures that were more than animals, guardians, bound by blood to the land itself. Elara, a young botanist driven by her thirst for discovery, stepped into this hidden world under the pretense of research. Yet her journey was far more personal. She had grown up with tales from her grandmother about the keepers of the valley, great beasts that watched over both man and earth, when harmony existed between them. Skeptics called them myths, but Elara believed otherwise. She carried with her not just tools of science, but the quiet hope of finding something to fill the void her grandmother's passing had left. As dawn painted the forest gold, she crossed the river's edge and felt, for the first time, eyes upon her. Something or someone was watching. Her first encounter came when a rustle broke the silence. From the thicket emerged not a predator but two wolf cubs, their fur silver as moonlight. Unlike ordinary wolves, their gaze did not hold fear nor aggression. It held recognition, as though they had been waiting for her. Elara froze, instincts urging her to step back, but the cubs approached with unsteady paws, sniffing the air between them. Behind them, deeper in the shadows, larger shapes lingered. She realized she was not meeting stray pups. These cubs belonged to the legendary moon pack her grandmother had spoken of. The elders always warned, never approach the guardians young, for their parents protect them with wrath older than mankind. But the cubs pressed closer, their tails wagging faintly, unafraid. Elara's hands trembled as she knelt, extending a cautious palm. To her astonishment, one cub placed its head upon her knee, as though accepting her presence. The moment of peace shattered when a deep growl thundered through the forest. From the undergrowth emerged a colossal wolf, its fur streaked with white scars and eyes glowing with a primal fire. The Alpha. Elara's breath caught in her throat, fear spreading like wildfire through her veins. She knew the stories well. Trespassers. Who dared touch the young rarely lived to tell the tale. Yet the cubs remained at her side, whining softly, refusing to leave her. The Alpha's gaze flicked between them and the trembling human. It stepped closer, its paws heavy upon the earth, each movement vibrating through her bones. Elara whispered, barely audible, "I mean no harm." For a heartbeat, the Alpha's eyes softened. He lowered his head, inhaling her scent. Then, instead of striking, he turned and released a long, echoing howl that rolled across the valley. To her shock, the cubs yipped in response, as though she had been accepted, at least for now. From that day forward, the forest ceased to be merely a place of research. Elara found herself drawn into the rhythm of the wolves' lives. Each morning, she awoke to find the cubs waiting near her tent, tugging playfully at her boots. At first, she thought it coincidence, but soon she understood. It was choice. They wanted her near, though the Alpha remained distant. Watching with suspicion, he never drove her away. The pack moved like shadows around her camp, visible only when they wished to be. At night, their haunting songs wove through the trees, both terrifying and strangely comforting. Elara documented every detail in her journal, behavior, markings, interactions. Yet her heart knew this was more than science. She was part of something sacred, a fragile bond between worlds. And with each passing day, she wondered not whether she was studying them, but whether they were studying her. The turning point came when hunters entered the valley. They were outsiders, armed with rifles and greed, seeking to capture the legendary wolves, rumored to fetch fortunes on the black market. Elara discovered them near the river, whispering of pelts and trophies. Terror and anger flared within her, for she knew the pack stood no chance against bullets. That night, she followed the cubs deeper into the forest, where the Alpha awaited atop a ridge. She spoke aloud as if the beast could understand. "Danger is coming. They will kill you." The Alpha tilted his head, amber eyes reflecting the torchlight she carried. Then, to her disbelief, he nudged one cub toward her, as if entrusting her with something precious. The weight of responsibility crashed over her. She was no longer a visitor. She was chosen. The following days became a test of courage and trust. Elara shadowed the pack as quietly as she could, learning the rhythms of their existence. She discovered that the wolves were not merely predators, but caretakers of the valley. They guarded watering holes from rival beasts, nudged fallen branches from deer trails, and even howled at night in patterns that seemed less like random cries and more like messages across the land. The cubs, however, remained inseparable from her side. They played with her shoelaces, pawed at her notebook, and curled against her when she rested. At times she wondered if she had unintentionally stolen them away, but whenever the alpha appeared, his gaze carried neither accusation nor wrath. Instead, it held an ancient patience, as though he had seen this bond forming long before she arrived. And in that patience, Elara sensed an unspoken warning. The pack was watching how she would use their trust. One evening, while sketching the forest's flora, Elara heard gunshots echo through the trees. Her heart lurched. Hunters. She ran toward the sound, stumbling over roots until she reached a clearing. There, two poachers knelt beside a snare, their rifles gleaming under fading sunlight. And caught within the trap was not a wolf, but a young elk, thrashing in panic. The men laughed cruelly, discussing how its cries would draw the wolves near. Rage boiled in Elara's veins. Without thought, she hurled a stone that clattered against their supplies. The distraction bought enough time for the elk to break, free and vanish into the trees. But the hunters turned, spotting her. "Well, look what we found," one sneered. Fear clawed at her, but she stood tall, declaring, "This valley is not yours to destroy." Before they could respond, a chilling howl split the air. The pack was near. The hunters raised their rifles, scanning the shadows. Elara knew she had only seconds before blood would stain the soil. The alpha emerged first, massive and unyielding, his fur bristling in fury. The rest of the pack fanned out, their eyes glowing like embers in the dusk. The hunters froze, the weight of primal terror rooting them in place. Elara stepped forward, positioning herself between rifles and wolves, her voice steady despite her pounding heart. "Leave now," she warned, "or you will never leave at all." The poachers exchanged fearful glances, but greed often blinds reason. One lifted his weapon, finger twitching on the trigger. In that instant, the alpha lunged, his roar shaking the clearing. The rifle flew from the man's grip as he fell back, scrambling in terror. His companion fled, crashing through the brush, screaming. Within moments, the hunters were gone, and silence returned, save for Elara's ragged breathing. That night, the pack surrounded her camp not as jailers but as guardians. The cubs nestled close, while the older wolves paced the perimeter. Elara sat by her fire, shaken but resolute. She realized the valley's legends were true. The wolves did not merely survive here. They ruled as defenders of balance. And now, by some strange twist of fate, she was entwined in their struggle. She whispered to the alpha, who lingered just beyond the firelight, "I will protect this place as you do. I promise." His ears twitched, and though he gave no other sign, she felt her vow had been heard. Sleep came slowly, but when it did, it was filled with dreams of moonlit hunts and shadows moving as one. In her heart, a seed had been planted. No longer was she just a visitor. She was becoming a guardian, too. Days turned into weeks, and Elara's bond with the cubs grew unbreakable. They followed her into the meadows where she collected samples, splashed beside her when she bathed in the stream, and whimpered whenever she strayed too far. Slowly, the rest of the pack began to accept her presence. A young wolf with a torn ear often lay near her while she wrote, while another with golden fur brought small gifts, bones, feathers, stones polished by the river. Elara recorded these gestures, knowing she was witnessing something no human had seen for centuries. Yet even in this fragile peace, danger loomed. The hunters had not vanished completely. She often spotted footprints near the valley's edge, or heard distant cracks of gunfire. The wolves knew it too. Their patrols grew longer, their howls more urgent. The valley was bracing for war, and Elara was caught between the world of man and beast. The first snowfall came earlier than expected, draping the valley in a blanket of silence. For Elara, it was both breathtaking and terrifying. Snow meant food would grow scarce, and predators desperate. Yet the wolves adapted gracefully. She watched them dig through drifts to uncover buried caches, lead deer herds safely to meadows, and even share scraps with scavenging birds. To her surprise, the cubs seemed unfazed by the cold, tumbling joyfully in the powder as though every flake were a gift. Elara wrapped herself in furs and stayed close, grateful for their warmth. But winter also meant the hunters would be hungrier. their greed sharpened by hardship. One night, as the fire flickered low, she spotted torchlight moving in the distance. They were back. The wolves howled in unison, a cry that shook the trees, not of fear but of defiance. It was clear the coming days would test them all. The next morning, Elara set out to track the intruders. Her boots crunched over frozen ground as she followed broken branches and discarded shells. At the edge of a clearing, she found a cruel sight, snares scattered like landmines. Bait hung from low branches and pits dug into the earth. The hunters were laying a trap for the pack. Rage burned in her chest. She dismantled what she could, cutting ropes and covering pits with branches. But she knew she could not work alone. Returning to the wolves, she knelt before the Alpha, speaking with desperate urgency. "They want to end you, but together we can stop them." His golden eyes studied her in silence. Then with a growl he summoned the pack. They circled her, and for the first time, she felt not just accepted but enlisted. They were no longer separate worlds. They were allies preparing for battle. Night fell, and the forest became a battlefield of shadows. The hunters crept with rifles raised, confident their traps would cripple the wolves. But they underestimated both the pack's cunning and Elara's resolve. She had memorized their patterns, anticipating each move. When a hunter crouched to check a snare, a wolf darted from the darkness, knocking him flat. Another tried to aim at the Alpha, but Elara hurled a burning branch from her fire, forcing him to stumble back. Chaos erupted, howls, shouts, gunshots splitting the cold air. The wolves fought not as beasts, but as warriors, coordinated and fierce. Elara moved among them, shielding the cubs, guiding them through the chaos. For every trap set, she found a way to spring it safely. Fear coursed through her, yet determination held her steady. She knew this was more than survival. This was the valley's judgment upon those who dared desecrate it. The battle raged deep into the night. Snow was stained red, trees splintered by bullets. Elara's heart pounded as she fought alongside the wolves, her breath visible in harsh bursts of air. She narrowly dodged a rifle blast, the shot grazing her arm, searing pain ripping through her. The cubs whimpered, circling her in worry. Still, she pressed on, refusing to falter. The Alpha struck like a phantom, his massive frame toppling hunters with crushing force. But the enemy was relentless, driven by greed that outshone fear. Elara realized the wolves could not win by brute strength alone. They needed strategy. With trembling hands, she lit another torch and waved it high, drawing the hunters' attention. "Over here!" she shouted, luring them toward the river's frozen edge. The wolves understood. As the hunters charged, the ice cracked beneath their boots, sending them plunging into the freezing depths. The forest roared with victory. When dawn arrived, silence fell once more. The hunters had fled or been swallowed by the icy river, their weapons abandoned in the snow. Elara collapsed to her knees, exhaustion pulling at every muscle. The pack gathered around her, the Alpha bowing his great head as though in acknowledgement of her bravery. The cubs licked her wounds, whimpering with worry, their warmth soothing her pain. Tears blurred her vision, but they were not of sorrow. They were of relief, of triumph, of belonging. She had entered the valley as a stranger, yet now she was bound to it by blood and fire. For the first time, she whispered not to herself but to the pack, "I am one of you." And in that sacred moment, the wolves raised their heads and howled, a chorus that welcomed her into their eternal family. Life after the battle shifted. Elara remained in the valley, mending her wounds and learning the wolves' ways more deeply. She observed how the Alpha divided roles. Some guarded the perimeter, others hunted while the cubs were nurtured with discipline and affection. It struck her how similar they were to human families, bound not by laws but by loyalty. The cubs grew stronger each day, their playful mischief tempered by lessons from older wolves. Elara became their second teacher, guiding them gently, sharing food, and even crafting toys from twigs and hides. She realized she was no longer recording observations for a journal, but living a story herself. And with each passing moon, her ties to the outside world weakened. Letters she had once planned to send to her colleagues never left her satchel. Deep inside, she feared if she told them the truth, they would come not as friends but as takers. As winter thawed, the valley awakened with color. Wildflowers carpeted the meadows, streams gushed with renewed vigor, and the wolves' coats gleamed in the sunlight. Elara felt reborn alongside them, but the hunter's shadow lingered in her mind. Though they had been defeated, she knew greed was a persistent plague. The world outside would not rest until it consumed even the sacred corners of the earth. One evening, as she watched the sunset with the Alpha at her side, she spoke softly. "If they come again, I won't let them harm you. Not while I still breathe." The Alpha turned, his gaze heavy with an understanding deeper than words. He brushed his muzzle against her shoulder, a gesture of kinship. It was then she realized she no longer thought of herself as human among wolves. She was a wolf in spirit, her fate entwined with theirs until the end. But fate is never gentle. A year passed in harmony before whispers of intrusion returned. This time it was not reckless hunters, but a well-funded expedition, men with vehicles, cages, and firepower far beyond what the pack had faced before. They came not only to kill, but to capture, determined to exploit the wolves for profit and spectacle. Elara felt dread claw at her heart. The valley, vast as it was, could not withstand machines. She gathered the pack, urging them higher into the mountains, where cliffs and caves offered protection. The journey was grueling, the cubs, now young wolves, panting with exhaustion. Still, they pressed on, driven by instinct and loyalty. Elara led them as best she could. But in the quiet of night, she feared the truth. They could not run forever. If humanity had declared war on the valley, then perhaps their survival demanded more than flight. The enemy struck swiftly. Trucks rumbled into the forest, metal cages clanging in their beds. Searchlights pierced the night. Engines growled like beasts of steel. The pack scattered, weaving through trees, but tranquilizer darts hissed through the air, felling 2 wolves before Elara's horrified eyes. She screamed, charging at the intruders with nothing but a branch aflame from her campfire. "Stay away from them!" she cried, swinging wildly. The men laughed, dismissing her as nothing more than a nuisance. But the wolves rallied. The Alpha leapt onto a vehicle, ripping through metal with terrifying strength. Young wolves flanked their human sister, fangs bared, eyes blazing. Elara fought with desperation, wielding fire, stones, and fury. Yet for every man they drove back, more arrived. Hope flickered, fragile as a candle in a storm. Still, she refused to surrender. For in her heart she knew she was not fighting for herself, but for family. The battle stretched into dawn. Smoke choked the air, gunfire cracked, and the once pristine valley trembled beneath the clash of nature and man. Elara moved as though possessed, her body screaming with pain yet refusing to fall. The Alpha, bloodied but unbroken, rallied the wolves again and again. Together they turned the tide, striking with precision. A vehicle overturned, cages shattered, and captured wolves freed. Elara seized the moment, guiding them into the mountains. But victory came at a cost. The Alpha staggered, a dart buried deep in his side, his breaths ragged. Elara rushed to him, tears streaming. "No, please don't leave me," she whispered. He nuzzled her one last time, eyes filled with both sorrow and pride. With a final howl that echoed through every corner of the valley, the Alpha fell. The wolves raised their voices in mourning, their grief shaking the heavens. The Guardian was gone. For days, the pack lingered in silence, mourning their fallen leader. Elara felt hollow, the weight of loss pressing heavily upon her soul. She had never known such grief, yet she could not crumble. The young wolves looked to her now with eyes that asked unspoken questions. What next? Who will guide us? Elara felt unworthy, but she remembered the Alpha's final gesture, his last look of trust. He had not simply died, he had passed the mantle. Gathering her strength, she rose. "We will not break," she told them, her voice trembling but resolute. "We will fight. We will survive. For him." The pack answered with a unified howl, their faith binding them. In that moment, Elara stepped not as an outsider, but as their new Alpha. Seasons passed, and under Elara's leadership, the pack flourished. She led them to new hunting grounds, taught them to avoid human machines, and fortified their dens with clever traps. The cubs she had first met grew into formidable hunters, their loyalty unwavering. Legends spread among villages at the forest's edge of a woman who walked with wolves, a ghostly figure guarding the valley with fangs and fire. Poachers who dared to enter, returned with tales of glowing eyes and shadows that moved as one. Fear became their weapon, and for a time, peace returned. Yet Elara knew peace was fragile. She often gazed at the stars, wondering if humanity would ever learn to coexist, or if the valley's battle would be eternal. Still, she vowed to protect it, no matter how many lifetimes it required. The valley had chosen her, and she had chosen it in return. Years blurred together, and Elara herself became part of the legend. Her hair silvered, her hands calloused, but her spirit never wavered. The wolves remained her family, each generation carrying the legacy of the alpha who had first accepted her. She grew old in their care, her heart more beast than human, her laughter mingling with their howls. Children from distant villages whispered of the Wolf Mother, a guardian who appeared in times of danger to drive away trespassers. Though she never sought worship, Elara understood the power of myth. Myths protect what truth cannot, and so she let the legend grow, knowing that fear and reverence would guard the valley longer than her mortal body ever could. One winter night, as the moon bathed the valley in silver light, Elara felt her strength waning. The wolves gathered around her, their eyes glistening with sorrow. She stroked their fur one by one, whispering words of love and gratitude. To the cubs, now strong young hunters, she said, "Never forget who you are. Guardians of this land, protectors of all life." To her dearest companions, she gave her final smile. Then, lying upon the snow beneath the stars, she closed her eyes and drifted into the eternal sleep of peace. The wolves howled, not in mourning, but in celebration of a life lived with loyalty and love. Her spirit, they believed, would forever run with them, a shadow among the trees, a whisper in the wind. Generations later, travelers still tell the story of Arendale's valley. They speak of glowing eyes that watch from the tree line, of howls that echo like voices of the past, and of a woman who once walked as one of the pack. Some dismiss it as folklore, but those who listen closely know the truth. The valley remembers. Elara's legacy lives on in every paw print pressed into the soil, every howl that rolls across the mountains. The wolves remain, untamed and unbroken, guardians of the Forgotten Valley. And somewhere, when the moon is full and the forest sleeps, a lone figure can still be seen, hair silver as starlight, walking side by side with wolves, reminding the world that harmony is possible when love conquers fear.